Welcome to the Books Bible Study, where we are going through the entire 66 books of the Bible, starting at Genesis. We are now on Genesis 18. So, good morning. Welcome. Let's begin. Verse 1. Then the Lord appeared to him by the terebinth trees of Mamre, as he was sitting in the tent door in the heat of the day. Verse 2. So he lifted his eyes and looked, and behold, three men were standing by him. And when he saw them, he ran from the tent door to meet them and bowed himself to the ground. Verse 3. And said, My Lord, if I have now found favor in your sight, do not pass on by your servant. Verse 4. Please let a little water be brought, and wash your feet, and rest yourselves under the tree. Verse 5. And I will bring a morsel of bread, that you may refresh your hearts. After that, you may pass by, inasmuch as you have come to your servant. They said, Do as you have said. Verse 6. So Abraham hurried into the tent to Sarah and said, Quickly, make ready 3 measures of fine meal, knead it, and make cakes. Verse 7. And Abraham ran to the herd, took a tender and good calf, gave it to a young man, and he hastened to prepare it. Verse 8. So he took butter and milk and the calf which he had prepared, and set it before them, and he stood by them under the tree as they ate. Verse 9. Then they said to him, Where is Sarah your wife? So he said, Here, in the tent. Verse 10. And he said, I will certainly return to you according to the time of life, and behold, Sarah your wife shall have a son. Sarah was listening in the tent door which was behind him. Verse 11. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in age, and Sarah had passed the age of childbearing. So we see that there was a natural limitation in her body. It was an actual limitation, right? Verse 12. Therefore Sarah laughed within herself, saying, After I have grown old, shall I have pleasure, my Lord being old also? Verse 13. And the Lord said to Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh, saying, Shall I surely bear a child since I'm old? Verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? Genesis chapter 18, verse 14. Is anything too hard for the Lord? That should be somebody's declaration, right? At the appointed time, I will return to you according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. So this is my question to you concerning the situation that continues to stress you out, to keep you up at night. Is anything, can you name anything that is too hard for our Lord? How have you discounted yourself from receiving what he promised you that he would do? Yes, there might be natural limitations, right? But at the appointed time, it shall happen. So he told Abraham that he will return according to the time of life, and Sarah shall have a son. Verse 15. But Sarah denied it, saying, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. And he said, No, but you did laugh. Verse 16. Then the men rose from there and looked toward Sodom, and Abraham went with them to send them on their way. Verse 17. And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. Verse 19. He says, But I have known him, in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord, to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. So it was Abraham's obligation to teach the ways of the Lord, to teach the ways of righteousness to his household, so that that covenant could come to pass, right? God had a covenant with Abraham, and maybe that potential loss of his nephew, right, may have affected him. But I believe God had a personal relationship with Abraham, and I believe he wanted to give Abraham that opportunity to save his nephew and their family, right? Verse 20. And the Lord said, because the outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is great, and because their sin is very grave. Verse 21, I will go down now and see whether they have done altogether according to the outcry against it that has come to me. And if not, I will know. Verse 22, then the men turned away from there and went toward Sodom, but Abraham stood still before the Lord. Verse 23, and Abraham came near and said, would you also destroy the righteous with the wicked? When you don't know, you don't know. Okay? And when you know, you know. Right? Verse 24. Abraham says, suppose there were 50 righteous within the city. Would you also destroy the place and not spare for the 50 righteous that were in it? Verse 25. Far be it from you to do such a thing as this, to slay the righteous with the wicked, so that the righteous should be as the wicked. Far be it from you. Shall not the judge of all the earth do right? Okay. Verse 26. So the Lord said, if I find in Sodom 50 righteous within the city, then I will spare all the place for their sakes. Verse 27. Then Abraham answered and said, indeed now, he backed up a little bit. He said, indeed now, I who am but dust and ashes have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Verse 28. Suppose there were 5 less than the 50 righteous. Would you destroy all of the city for lack of 5? So he said, if I find there 45, I will not destroy it. Verse 29. And he spoke to him yet again and said, suppose there should be 40 found there. So he said, I would not do it for the sake of 40. Verse 30. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak. Suppose 30 should be found there. See, he's going down and down. He knows, right? Suppose 30 should be found there. So he said, I will not do it if I find 30 there. Verse 31. And he said, indeed now, I have taken it upon myself to speak to the Lord. Suppose 20 should be found there. So he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 20. Verse 32. Then he said, let not the Lord be angry, and I will speak but once more. Suppose 10 should be found there. And he said, I will not destroy it for the sake of 10. Verse 33. So the Lord went his way as soon as he had finished speaking with Abraham, and Abraham returned to his place. So 50 righteous in a city, right, is really telling us how wicked they really were to have to get down to 10, right? So my question to you before we go on to the next chapter is, do you think it was more or less than 10 in that city that was righteous? And we'll find out in the next chapter. But before we read the next chapter, I want you to write that question and answer it before you go to the next chapter. Okay, so now we see the Lord once again reminding Abraham about his promise, about the seed that's going to come from Sarah. It's going to come from Abraham. And then we see the Lord's kindness toward Abraham to warn him about what he's getting ready to do to Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So he's given him the opportunity to get Lot out of trouble again, right? So, because somehow he ends up back there, okay? So he just got rescued and he ends up back there. So before we go to chapter 19, I want you to write that question and answer it. Do you think it was more or less than 10 righteous in that city? Okay? So I will see you all at 7 p.m. We will go on to chapter 19. God bless.